They say Hansel and Gretel is a story about breadcrumbs, about clever kids, a candy house, and a witch who lost. But that's not how it began. Because Hansel and Gretel isn't just a made-up story. It's based on actual events. In 14th century Europe, famine turned villages into graveyards. Parents abandoned their children. People cooked roots and something worse. In the woods, it wasn't just beasts you feared. It was the starving, the ones who had already crossed the line. And somewhere in that dark place, a story took shape about a witch and a trap so tempting, it's still talked about today. And the children who were never supposed to leave didn't, not in the earliest tellings. This is the shocking true story behind Hansel and Gretel, and it's anything but sweet.
Welcome to the manor. I've been expecting you.
I hope you're hungry.
What many people don't know is that Hansel and Gretel wasn't born in 1812. It has roots going back centuries before that, long before the Grimms. Scholars trace versions of this folktale back to oral storytelling traditions in the 14th century, or even earlier. These were times of famine, plague, and war, where families sometimes had to abandon children to survive. Yes, that really happened. Stories of forest witches who lived deep in the woods and lured or stole children to eat them weren't rare. In fact, they were a common feature across European folklore. These weren't whimsical witches with broomsticks and bubbling cauldrons. They were embodiments of hunger, cruelty, and predation. Even earlier oral folktales from Slavic regions, Germany and Italy, speak of creatures or witches who prey on children. These weren't just bedtime stories. They were warnings. Stay away from the woods. Don't talk to strangers. Hunger changes people. So when we talk about the origin of Hansel and Gretel, we're not just talking about a fairy tale. We're talking about a myth that reflects real history, starvation, child abandonment, and the ancient fear of being devoured by the very people who claim to offer shelter. And that makes the witch's gingerbread house even more horrifying, because what's more dangerous than something that looks sweet on the outside, but is hiding a predator within? When Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm first recorded the story in 1810, a handwritten manuscript version, the mother was the one who insisted on abandoning the children. There was no stepmother. But by the time it was published in 1812, they had revised the character into a stepmother, likely to soften the moral impact for readers. This change was also strategic. Early readers and later Victorian audiences preferred to view mothers as nurturing. So, blame the cruelty on a wicked stepmother, a trope that was easier to digest. This same tactic was used in Snow White, Cinderella, and others. Later editions from the Grimms, especially post-1819, cleaned up the story even more, adding Christian moral overtones and softening brutality. This is how the brothers Grimm told it in 1812. A poor woodcutter lives with his wife and 2 children, Hansel and Gretel, in a cottage near a forest. A great famine strikes the land, and the family struggles to survive. The wife, their stepmother, convinces the father to abandon the children in the woods, so they have fewer mouths to feed. We must rid ourselves of them, or all 4 of us will starve. Hansel overhears the plan and gathers white pebbles under moonlight. The next day, as the parents lead the children into the woods and leave them, Hansel drops the pebbles behind him. That night, the children follow the trail back home. The stepmother is furious. This time, Hansel tries to gather pebbles again, but she locks the door. He instead crumbles bread on the path, but birds eat the crumbs. The children are now truly lost. After wandering for days, Hansel and Gretel come upon a strange house made of bread, cake, and sugar windows. A kind old woman welcomes them inside, but she is actually a cannibalistic witch who built the house to lure children. She locks Hansel in a cage and forces Gretel to cook to fatten him up. Every day she checks Hansel's finger to see if he's getting plumper, but he holds out a chicken bone he found, tricking her since she has poor eyesight. Finally frustrated, the witch prepares the oven to cook Hansel. She tells Gretel to climb in to see if it's hot enough.
How does it work?
Gretel pretends she doesn't understand how to check the oven. When the witch leans in, Gretel shoves her in and slams the iron door shut, where the witch burns to death. Gretel frees Hansel. They find treasure in the witch's home and fill their pockets. They journey home, eventually finding their father again. The wicked stepmother has died in the meantime. There is no explanation of how this happened, so there is a popular theory that the evil witch was actually the stepmother, but it's just a theory. The family is now wealthy and happy, and that's how the Grimm's Hansel and Gretel ends. The witch in Hansel and Gretel isn't a standalone villain. She belongs to one of the oldest archetypes in folklore, the crone, an ancient figure that transcends borders and cultures. You'll find her across continents under different names, but always with the same dark shape. In nearly every version, she dwells at the boundary between the civilized and the wild. In Slavic folklore, Baba Yaga lives in a hut on chicken legs deep in the woods. It spins, turns, and only allows passage to those it chooses. In English legend, Black Anis lurks in caves in the Dane hills with a taste for lambs and disobedient children. In Colombian and broader Latin American tales, La Patasola roams the jungle, appearing as a beautiful woman to lure men with charm, before revealing her monstrous form. The forest here isn't just a backdrop, it's the unknown, the threat of nature, a metaphor for scarcity and the fragility of safety. These crones prey on the vulnerable. Baba Yaga is said to stuff children into her oven or eat them whole. Black Anis is described with iron claws and a blue face, ripping skin from bones and wearing it as a skirt. La Patasola, while sometimes seen as an avenger of forest creatures, is also said to feast on the blood of those she deceives. These women of the woods don't just punish, they test. They lure the greedy, the unfaithful, the desperate, and make them pay for it. In Hansel and Gretel, the witch fattens Hansel up to devour him and dies in fire when her prey outsmarts her. But in other versions, especially oral variants, the witch often wins, or the ending is left vague. She's not meant to be destroyed. She's meant to warn. She wasn't just a witch. She was famine. She was punishment. She was the consequence of being unwanted. And that's why centuries later, she still scares us. You can see these figures emerge in times of famine, plague, or instability. They are the dark reflection of motherhood, the fear that the maternal figure could turn against their own child. They carried traits living alone, wielding power, commanding magic. In these societies, those traits were often cast as evil, but they also served a practical purpose. In medieval and early modern Europe, telling children, "Don't go into the woods, or the witch will eat you," was a survival tactic.
Come closer, little ones. You must be starving.
In times of starvation, getting lost meant death or worse. The crone made that risk real. This is why many folklorists believe she's not meant to be a villain you defeat. She's the fear you respect, the danger you don't test. In the original version, it wasn't the witch who was evil first. It was their own parents. The horror of Hansel and Gretel doesn't begin in the woods. It begins at home. In the 1812 Grimm version and in many earlier oral tales, the parents of Hansel and Gretel don't lose their children by accident. They abandon them on purpose, and they do it twice. The justification? Starvation. This isn't just a fairy tale device. It mirrors a grim historical reality. Across Europe, from the 14th century through the 18th, widespread famine haunted generations. The Great Famine devastated Northern Europe, causing mass starvation. Smaller but deadly food crises followed. Harsh winters, crop failure, and war disrupted rural life. Starting around the 1300s, temperatures dropped across Europe. Winters grew longer, summers shorter, and crops began to fail. Harvests drowned in flooded fields. Grain rotted. Orchards withered. The land stopped feeding the people. The Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 devastated Northern Europe. And then came the wars. The 100 Years' War, the Peasant Wars, endless local skirmishes. Soldiers stormed through farmland, pillaging crops, burning grain stores, and tearing through already starving communities. As if that wasn't enough, famine opened the door to disease. The hungry got sick, and the sick got weaker. Then came the Black Death. In some regions, 30 to 60% of the population died. Entire towns disappeared. The economy collapsed. Food prices soared. Bread became a luxury. The rich hoarded what they could. The poor starved. Some families did abandon children or sent them to monasteries, orphanages, or simply out to survive on their own. And in some extreme cases, they did exactly what the witch was going to do with Hansel and Gretel. Folktales absorbed this terror. The woods became a symbol of both freedom and death, a place children were cast into when their families could no longer protect them. Many scholars believe the stepmother in Hansel and Gretel is a literary stand-in. Earlier oral versions often name both parents as the culprit. Fairy tales, passed down through generations, turned that trauma into metaphor. The forest wasn't just dangerous. It was where desperation pushed the forgotten. Hansel and Gretel weren't lost. They were left. The witch's house wasn't just made of candy. It was built from something deeper, a trap disguised as comfort. At first glance, Hansel and Gretel's most iconic image is whimsical. A house made entirely of sugar, cakes, and gingerbread. But that sweet exterior hides a much darker truth. The house is bait, designed to attract hungry children, the ultimate symbol of false security. The warm oven smell, the sugar-coated walls, they promise safety, comfort, even love. But behind the door waits death.
Come in, dears.
The idea of using food to trap the vulnerable has ancient roots, from Greek myths to cautionary tales told during famine. Beware the free feast. If you're starving and someone offers you everything you crave, ask what they want in return. In Hansel and Gretel, the witch doesn't force them in. She tempts them. She lets them believe they're safe until it's too late. But where did the gingerbread idea come from? Lebkuchen, a spiced honey cake similar to gingerbread, has deep roots in German baking, with versions existing since at least the 13th century. By the 1600s, Lebkuchen was a staple in German Christmas markets, especially in regions like Nuremberg. Lebkuchenhäuser were decorative gingerbread houses crafted by bakers around Christmas time, serving as festive displays and treats. These edible houses were traditionally symbols of celebration and abundance. The Grimms did not invent the gingerbread house. However, their story of Hansel and Gretel featured a house made of bread and sugar, very similar to the gingerbread house concept. Their tale popularized the idea of a gingerbread house globally, giving it a dark fairy tale twist. In modern retellings, whether it's cartoons, films, or children's books, Hansel and Gretel is often simplified. The witch is a monster. The kids are naive. The parents are barely mentioned. The terrifying complexity of the original tale gets scrubbed clean. Gone are the themes of famine, poverty, and abandonment. Gone is the oven. Gone is the moral ambiguity. Instead, we get a neat fable about stranger danger and being clever. Many modern adaptations borrow only the candy house. They frame the story as a fantasy adventure, something magical, not monstrous. When the brothers Grimm first collected the tale, it wasn't just to entertain. It was to warn. Warn of the real desperation that could lead a mother to abandon her children. Warn of the traps that promise comfort in a time of need. Warn of what happens when survival is the only goal. The original Hansel and Gretel isn't just about an evil witch. It's about a world where parents leave their children to fend for themselves, and children must survive by any means necessary. The witch is terrifying, but the first betrayal comes from the family, and that's what most versions leave out. In the Grimm story, we ask, why were they in the woods in the first place? And what kind of world makes parents choose survival over their children's lives? Hansel and Gretel isn't just a fairy tale. It's a survival manual dressed in sugar. Behind the gingerbread walls is hunger. Behind the candy is cruelty. And behind the story we tell our children is the truth we try to forget. That sometimes the ones who are supposed to protect us leave us behind. That sometimes the sweetest looking shelter hides the worst kind of monster. So maybe that's why we still tell this story. Not because it's comforting, but because it warns us, even now. Don't trust what looks too good to eat. Don't follow the trail too far. And never forget who led you into the woods. Let me know, which version do you like better, Grimm or the newer adaptations? If you thought Hansel and Gretel was dark, wait until you see what really happened in the original Little Red Riding Hood. Go watch that one next. If you made it this far into the woods without getting lost and liked the video, don't forget to leave a like. Thanks for watching.